Try to ignore Oscar, actually, because Oscar will want to come down and destroy the performance by slobbering on people and so on. Yeah. He got caught by the dog catcher and they weighed him. And actually, we had one of the guys who's a trainer for the Broncos called Chris Rose. He was all just muscle. He weighed 75 kilos. Yeah, it's lovely. Okay, so this is my house, my humble abode, ramshackle abode. It's an ancient house by, I suppose, Australian standards, especially given that our standing structures we tend to knock down, and Indigenous people didn't really live behind too many standing structures. But it's seen a lot of tragedies and so on. I won't go into any of the details. It's to do with the family who own it, I guess, privacy around them. I've lived here since 2012, beginning of 2012. I moved in with a guy called Craig. Craig I'd already lived with a year somewhere else, and I lived with him a year and a half somewhere else. I lived with him 6 years here, so we're kind of this fucked up married couple who, we'd always be yelling at each other. He was like 6'3", so it wasn't really that scary actually. But he used to like to he just anywhere you left like a wheelbarrow or in any sink there'd be rubbish instantly filling it up. And he used to have these science experiments in the fridge. And one day he said to me, he goes, "Jerry, I realised that a refrigerator doesn't work so well if it's full of rotten food." Yep, correct. So yeah, but we had a lot of good times together despite all that. And when he left, I did feel like a jilted lover. It was really weird. I'm like, okay, what's going on? Why am I feeling jilted? He wasn't even that great a housemate, but I felt jilted. And then I turned it into an Airbnb. I had sort of 3 rooms upstairs and 1 downstairs. And I was really glad to find this place because I like old Queenslanders or semi-Queenslanders, and also I always have enjoyed living by inland bodies of water. In case you haven't guessed, I'm not really a beach bunny. I don't have any pairs of shorts or anything like that, but I like the old inland bodies of water, and part of this is because I grew up in Canberra next to Lake Belly Griffin, but I'll tell you more about that at the correct time. In the meantime, come through and check the Mancave out.
We've got a lake coming as well, Jerry.
Have we?
Yep. Steve will bring him down.
All right, sweet. Come through, folks. Welcome to my humble abode. In you go. This is my band playing there. I've got a band called Gerald Keaney. The Gerald Keaneys, they're on Mancave, it's all free. So we just got the t-shirt. Amazing. Come on in. And make yourselves at home. It is a home. It's where I live. I cook down here sometimes. I also use upstairs, obviously, but I live here. I've got sort of, there's a shit's cabin in there.
He's a great cook.
Thanks. I live with Colin, aka Dame Gerald. I suppose the idea of this underneath is about creativity, and I've recorded stuff and so on here, and you can see some of my early attempts at graphic interventions over here. There's some sort of artworks here of punk nature, which was painted with sort of acrylics. So I've got the end of the paintbrush here and scratched that into the drawing paint. Then there's like a band-aid over the mouth, and I haven't said enough, and sort of I may or may not have been under the influence of LSD at this stage. Here's one of my kind of more cosmic numbers, sort of like teeth and kind of horns are coming out of like stardust. You get the idea.
What do you make it out of?
That's acrylic on paper, I think. Oh, and then I found these. Actually, found all these. People chuck out all these frames. So this is such a lovely frame. Someone chucked it. Look at it. It's got this wood grain in it. Someone chucked it. I just found it on the side of the road. And then I just repurposed it or upcycled, whatever you want to say. So, I guess creativity, like for instance surrealism, that was something else I was into. I went from sort of drugs, influenced by psychedelic drugs, to surrealism, where because the idea of surrealism is you sort of you write automatically or paint automatically So Andre Breton's definition is pure psychic automata, and I was in a radical surrealist group that occupied buildings in aid of free education. We lost, so sorry to yous who have to actually pay, but we did give it a go. And I went through a lengthy surrealist phase, and there I guess you explore the kind of unconscious mind, and you explore the sort of, well, I think it was Max Ernst who said there's just a sort of limitless reservoir of imagery in the preconscious mind. Probably better to call it that. And I was very into that. And I did a lot of stuff like band, as you know, and sort of poetry. And pursuant to this topic, as a demonstration of the aforementioned, I thought I would read you one of my poems. This one's called Welcome to the Utopian Sideshow. Hi! High-heeled, high-hose, himbos and bimbos to staff the outer limits of the burbs. And better than auto-apocalypse, better than environmental catastrophe, even better than chronic boredom, they get to hate me for writing this poem, for being a try-hard but not working, for being an intellectual yet being undecisive and stupid, and for being yet another freak. And here's what they yell in mangled cacophonous strophe and anti-strophe. I hate Gerald Keaney! I hate Gerald Keaney! I hate Gerald Keaney! Hate! Wanker! Wimp! Reprobate! Hate! And then they start to cry. Tears of pure hatred, of course. Do an impersonation. Hate. I sit back irresolute. All this hatred over just one poem. It's a little bit excessive, you know. But you know, folks have to lay their burden down somewhere, and it's better to be despicable than invisible, I always say, at least if I'm on the ball. It's my lot, if not my properties. So, in the spirit of flowing with the goey, I remain your humble servant. Oh, yeah, actually, the name of that poem is Welcome to the Utopian Sideshow. But when people are asking for it in poetry readings that I sometimes give, they yell out, I hate Gerald Keaney! I hate Gerald Keaney! I'm like, really? So that involvement in, I guess surrealism is the kind of thing which is, what's happening here is that you've got this kind of DIY art, right? And I got into that because I was, like, I'm 53 now, so I got into that because I was on this kind of tail end of the punk movement. And I saw the best and the worst of the punk movement, I think, in the 80s. And one of the ideas of the punk movement was DIY, doing it yourself. And I was very attracted to that for a number of reasons. I think that, well, I suppose there's a sense of activation there, isn't there? That, you know, that a punk encouraged people to go out and make their own clothes and so, for instance, you know, this is sort of like, this is all made clothes or modified clothes, you know, catwalk work, and that was a real kind of punk thing, and I think what winds up happening with the best of punk, of course, it did become commercialised, and all sorts of terrible things have happened with punk. It's more recently. I mean, it's really weird. I was just saying to Steve before. It's like skins have become much better, and punks have become much worse. You know, and there's all sorts of terrible things that have happened with punk. It has been there are Nazi punks and commercial punks and all the rest of it. But I suppose the idea there that was really good was the idea of doing it yourself. And in terms of art, you're looking at sort of the easy art. That's what I call it, like DIY, punk bands and so on. They're the easy art. In terms of more practical stuff, you're looking at just giving it a go, and learning from your errors. You're looking at the University of Easy Knocks, and hence I've already shown you the solar panels. I'll talk about that more. But what happens is that you wind up with this idea of creativity, and I was totally into this idea of creativity in everyday life, and I started to ask myself, what is creativity? And I came to the conclusion that creativity was accessing unusual states. And you don't want any old unusual states. I mean, you might argue, though you're probably wrong, that murder's an unusual state, for instance. But you want unusual states that are kind of win-wins. And they're states where in our society there are not a lot of win-wins. People are kind of like against each other, and we're destroying the environment. But there are unusual states which actually aren't that hard to access. It's the weird thing, where you might have wins between people, and a win for yourself and a win for the environment. And I began to think more about that, and that sort of took me away a bit from I guess what might be quarantined as art. And I became more and more interested in stuff like push bike maintenance. This isn't necessarily maybe a good example. This one's a bit better. Some of them need a bit of work, but this one's a fully functioning push bike. And if you ride a push bike, you wind up with this kind of win-win-win where you're fit and you're saving money, so you hit pocket wins, and you're sort of saving the planet. And you might say, oh, but hang on, there's nothing terribly imaginative or creative about riding a push bike. But that's not exactly true. I mean, there is this kind of real default expectation that everyone should have, 1.8 motor vehicles, and the 0.8 probably looks pretty weird, but like also with bikes and stuff like that, you have to use ingenuity and creativity to maintain and have them cheap. And then once you've done that, you're in a position where you've got more time and resources for, I guess, the creativity as you might more readily recognise it in say zines or bands. And what's happened here is I felt what was happening here was that I was kind of moving on to a next level. I was like, okay, I've done all this kind of weird stuff and so on, and now I have to think about how to promote it, how to really live it. I mean, when you're at school, you're told, oh, look, you've got to go out there and get, the high-paying 38-hour-a-week job. Well, what about thinking a bit laterally, work less but live more cheaply and still live well, right? And, and do the environment a favour. And so I was starting to think about how society and life could be a bit more creative, and how, rather than just sort of creating examples of this, like a punk band or a painting on LSD or whatever else, that it might be possible to become a representative or someone who furthered this. And I also got into another practical aspect. I got into was martial arts, partly because if you kind of look weird, like everyone in our society is supposed to have the right to dress how they want, except if you're stupid enough to actually use that right, And so I wound up sort of learning sort of martial arts, and again that seemed to me a way to to be able to defend myself when fuckheads called me a poofter before trying to bash me and so on. So that seemed like a way to defend what I thought was good about punk. But still, it didn't seem to me enough. Like I don't think I just don't think the revolution is going to be won by street fights. Or even if that's a necessary component of it, it's only one component. And I think what you want to do is to try and convince people about win-win-wins and about creativity and about how we can access these states. And so I needed more. I felt I needed more, and I got increasingly involved in analytic philosophy, which is the study of logic and logical argument. And I eventually did a PhD in analytic philosophy on identity, and logic of identity, and time and properties. And I felt, and I finished that in the earlier 2000s, and I kind of felt like, okay, now I'm in a position to kind of argue for this stuff, and I've tried to argue for this stuff in a variety of contexts, and you know, and I've got like blogs, and I've tried to argue for this stuff, where I've argued for, like, used logic to think about how we could be more creative and have a better society, and try to be convincing of people, you know. And I kind of figure like we could have the revolution if people were convincing. Like if I convince 2 and 2 convince 4 and 4 convince 8, we could get this chain reaction and have the revolution, you know. Maybe I'm just fucking on crack. I don't know. I'm not on crack, but I was on smack for a while. But I just think, you know, wow, maybe we could be convincing, you know. I mean, sometimes you do have to stand up for yourself too physically, but what about that idea of, you know, convincing people and being convincing? And so I guess I came to a position where I against, say for instance, postmodernism, which is very, you know, rife in the arts, I began to valorise reason and reasoned discourse. So you might ask, well, okay, this is a great, you know, here's a narrative. I don't know if it's great, maybe it's grating, but here's a narrative, and you know, this narrative. I mean, it's not so I'm a special person, but it is unusual in a sense. I think a lot of people wind up aspiring to work 38 hours a week, to have a house in the burbs, to, you know, to be successful in the corporate ladder and so on. So I guess it's an unusual life in that sense, or an unusual life trajectory. So here I am living under a house and yada yada. Drinking goon, it's pretty good actually. So you might ask, why? Why did I, you know, come to this? Why did I live this life? You know, not that I plan to shuffle off the mortal coil tomorrow or anything, but why did I live this life so far? And to answer this question, I'm going to take you back outside.